So around this time last year, I had the opportunity to work with a really cool company called Actio. They're a live streaming app based in Germany, aiming to change the way creators engage with their audiences. Now, they were originally kind of this fitness and yoga app, but they had reached out to our company to help them with some product strategy and sort of rebrand them in a sense. We ended up doing everything from art direction to kind of like a UX overhaul of the entire app. But the way it works in a nutshell is if I'm a coach or if I'm someone who has any sort of skill set where I feel compelled to share with my audience, I'm able to do that really easily. Basically, there's this home feed where anyone browsing the app can join either live or upcoming sessions. And then when the session starts, they have this really cool technology where Actio, the platform, actually calls you on your phone. And they've done a lot of research around this. They've learned that people don't miss as many classes this way because of this feature. But one of the main asks from the company was how might we actually get more people into the live sessions, right? So we didn't actually touch the live sessions themselves, but we kind of worked on that one layer up, that discovery experience. So what does that look like? How can we make something super engaging for users to want to join classes, connect with creators, grow communities? That was the main ask, and that's really what I'm going to be focusing on for this tutorial. At a later date, I'll do a full deep dive and share a full case study and basically show you my team's process from end to end. But for now, really just want to take you under the hood of After Effects, show you how I prototyped this home feed where we landed. It's a very relevant pattern these days, especially on mobile, this full bleed portrait video. We're seeing it in a lot of places. We know it works, right? Look at the explosion of TikTok, super engaging. So a lot of companies are borrowing this pattern, but yeah, just a good skill set to have at your disposal to know how to at least prototype this. All right, so before we start animating, it's really important that we prepare our files for export to After Effects. So here we are in Figma, and let's just take a look at what we're going to be exporting. So we have these first 3 slides, and we can actually just look at the video again, just to get a reminder of how this works. We have the slide 1, you'll see the progress bar filling up top. It would time out automatically, or the user has the ability to swipe to the next slide. Slide 2, and then slide 3. You'll notice slide 3 has this countdown here. We added that to kind of provide this sense of urgency for the user to want to join a live session. And that's another part that we need to take into account. I'm also going to get rid of the actual content in these slides because we're going to be dropping in video assets for those. So we can just get rid of these video assets like so. Another thing I'm going to do with this UI, like I said, we're going to be animating the progress. So I'm just going to get rid of these fills for now. So the fill of the progress bar, we can just hide in our actual UI. And then we also want to just get rid of this countdown because we're going to be doing that natively inside of After Effects. We can just take the opacity down for that timer. Another thing we want to take into account is these slides are going to be sliding underneath the fixed elements. So there's going to be some elements that are fixed. So what I'm going to do is just duplicate this, and we're going to call this one main. This will be like our main composition inside of After Effects that the slides will sit in and be swiping behind. So we can actually just get rid of the UI that we don't need for this main composition. So get rid of that header element and this details down here. So this, when you think about it, is what's going to be fixed, and the slides will be moving behind. And because of that, we can just get rid of the system UI and the nav bar for the UI here. So now we have basically everything we need to export to After Effects. We have the main composition, and then we have each slide, which is going to be sitting inside the main composition. So let's just select all these screens now, and I'm going to export them at 2x PNGs. And I created a folder on my desktop, just called tutorial, and I will add those there. And now we can head into After Effects. All right, so here we are inside of After Effects. What we want to do is take those assets that we exported and drag them in. I also have some video assets that I found on Envato Elements. That's where I get a lot of my kind of stock video assets for stuff like this. And I've just labeled those accordingly. They kind of correspond to the different slides. We have a cooking video, a meditation video, and a workout video, along with those assets that we just exported. I'm just going to drag those into our little file browser over here. And the first thing we're going to do is just take this main PNG and drag that to a new composition down here. And that's going to create a comp that's the exact same size as that PNG. So we didn't even have to create a new composition. It just kind of does it automatically, which is exactly what we want. Next, we're going to take our slide 1 and do the same thing. Drag that to a new composition. And this one is the workout slide. So let's grab our workout video and just position that underneath like so. Now to work on this progress bar, it's going to be super simple. We're going to use the pen tool. So you could press G on your keyboard or just click up here on the pen tool. Make sure no layers are selected, and then just make a point at the beginning of the progress and at the end, like so. And if you look at our Figma file, this is actually 2 pixels tall. The height is 2 pixels, but because we're working at 2x, we want to make sure the stroke is 4, so just double it. And we're going to make sure that stroke is white as well. And we can just name this progress. And if we twizzle down this accordion here, and we go into contents, and then we go into the path, one thing we want to do first, or sorry, not path, if we go into stroke, we want to make sure the line cap is set from butt to round. So just change that, because in our design, this is actually a rounded rectangle, technically. So yeah, just do that. We can close this back up now. So that would be step 1. Step 2, so we can animate this progress fill, what we want to do is come over to add, and we're going to add a trim paths. Trim paths is something I use all the time, especially for things like progress animations, whether it's a linear progress or a circular progress. Really great tool. Definitely something you should know how to do if you're going to be animating in After Effects. So we can open up the trim paths, and what we want to actually do is just mess with this end percentage. So as you see, as I'm dragging, we're getting kind of that motion that we want. But because it's a progress bar, we actually want to start that end position at 0. And let's just zoom in a little bit. And also my comp is way too long right now, so I'm just going to make sure it's the size of the video. So I'm just going to drag over to the end of where the video ends and hit N on my keyboard. And that's going to move this work area to 10 seconds. And I'm going to right click on it. I'm just going to do trim comp to work area. It just doesn't need to be that long. So where were we? Yeah, so once the end is at 0, we can just keyframe. You can go like 1 second in time just so this doesn't start right away, so we have some wiggle room to work with. But let's just keyframe end, and then maybe move forward maybe like 6 seconds or so in time, and then just bring that up to 100. And because this is actually, this has to do with a timer, and time moves at a constant rate, 1 second at a time, we don't have to worry about easing or anything. We can actually just keep this at linear. So there we go. That is basically our slide 1 done. Now, all we have to do is duplicate this slide 1 by hitting Command D, and we can click into that, just double click, and it'll open up a new comp. And all we want to do now is just replace the content inside. So we're going to replace the details here, and we're going to replace the actual video. And a really simple way to do that, if you select the video layer, for example, and we come over to the video we want to replace it with. So let me see, what was slide 2? I think slide 2 is our meditation one. Yeah, slide 2 is meditation. So let's find our meditation video and click and drag. Now holding Option or Alt on the PC, I believe, if you just drag it over that selected layer, it will just replace that layer. And we want to do the same thing for the details. So the slide 1 PNG, let's just replace it with our slide 2 PNG. So same thing, holding Alt, replace it, and now we have the correct content. And because we duplicated this, the progress should be working as well for this one. We don't have to redo that. So very cool. So that's slide 2 done. And then we want to do one more time for slide 3. So just same thing, select that composition, hit Command D, duplicate it, double click into it. Let's replace the content. So let's replace the video first with our cooking video. So drag, holding Alt, replace it. And then same thing with the slide 2 PNG. Let's replace it with the slide 3 PNG. Awesome. Now remember this one, we're going to add a little countdown here. And we purposely left it blank because we're going to be doing that part in After Effects. So I'll show you how to do that. We actually just want to come over to our text tool. You could just click on it. You can also hold Command T to bring up the text tool. And somewhere in this area, just for now, I'm just going to type a random number. It doesn't really matter. Now I had already set the font style, the weight, and the color, but you would obviously have to do that. You just come over here and choose your font, choose your color, choose your size. But again, I had already done that. I'm going to tap V to bring up my move tool and just position this I'm just doing an eyeball estimation rather than using a reference image here. It'll get close enough for all intents and purposes. So cool. Again, this is just a random number for now. Maybe something like that. And this is going to be our timer. So in order to get that to actually count down, corresponding with the progress bar here, we want to add an effect and preset called slider control. So just search for slider, it should pop up. We're going to take that effect, drag it right onto that text layer. And as you see, we have a slider control effect here in the effect controls panel. Now what we want to do is just twizzle down that layer. There's two things we need to do first. Just twizzle down the text and twizzle down the effects and slider control. You see with the stopwatch next to source text, we want to option click that. That's going to bring up this little expression, which is going to look really weird. Don't worry about it. Next to this expression source text, we have this little pick whip. We want to click and drag and attach that to our slider. So now what's happening, as you see, if I click off of that expression, I can use the slider to animate this countdown. And what's really cool is we can actually keyframe this. So say we wanted this to start, maybe the countdown starts at like 35 seconds or so. We can add a keyframe, and let's just make sure that this keyframe is starting when the progress is starting. So let's just line it up in our timeline. We can add a keyframe for slider at 36 seconds. And then since we went forward 6 seconds in time, at the 6 second mark here, or I guess it would be 5 seconds, right? Because we started at 1 second. We go forward 5 seconds in time, this would be 31, right? 36 minus 5. So now over this duration, this countdown is going to count down. Now obviously it looks janky right now because we have a ton of decimal places. That's because we haven't told After Effects that we need to round this number. So in order to do that, just click back on this expression. We're going to type in capital M, type out math.round. This is a little expression. Just click on round. And once these double parentheses appear, we can get rid of that final one. We can just cut it and paste it at the very end of this expression. And that should round off the number. Very cool. So now we have all of our slides. So if we go back into our project, and we can just do a little bit of cleanup now. It's always good to just stay organized as we go. I'm going to select all of my compositions now and drag them to a folder. And I'm just going to call this _comps. And then all of our images, we can drag to another folder, call these images. And then all these videos, same thing. Let's just call these video. Always good to stay organized, especially in After Effects as your files get larger and larger, just getting the good habits. I'm not the best at that, to be honest, but I'm trying to at least show you the right way to do it. Great, so now we can go into our main composition. Just double click back into that, and we can drag in our slides. So let's take our slide 1, slide 2, position underneath that one. Make sure your snapping is on so it snaps right into place. You see how we get some feedback that it's snapping. Same thing with slide 3, snap that right into place. Just make sure it snaps, there we go. And then take all of our slides and move them underneath that main composition. And I'm just gonna reorder them in the order in which we'll see them. So 1, 2, and 3. Awesome. Now to actually control this animation of that swipe animation, what I'd probably do here is add a null object. So if you right click off to the side here and do new null object, it's just going to add an empty layer, and we're going to use this empty layer to control the motion of the swiping animation. So one thing I want to do though is just fit this null object to comp. So you can just right click, you can do transform fit to comp, or you could press Command Option F, and that's going to make it the same size as your artboard. Maybe I'll just use my motion plugin here to center that anchor point right in the middle. And we'll just rename this layer swipe movement. And let's just position that above the slides. Now what we can do is just select all of these slides by holding Shift and selecting them, and then just pick whip that null object we made. So now if I just press P on my keyboard to bring up the position keyframe, as I'm changing the position of that null object, it's moving everything at once. So that's what we want. So let's just maybe let this first slide play out somewhat. So maybe around there. We can add a position keyframe for that null object right about there. And then move forward in time, maybe a little less than a second, right? This is just like how long it would take you to swipe to the next slide. And now we can just mess with our position. So if I do -812, that'll bring it halfway up, but because we worked at 2x, and 812 is the size of our artboard, but we're at 2x, we actually want to subtract another 812 from that. And that will be the end of that animation. Right now it's super linear and super kind of robotic. So what we can do is select these keyframes, and I'm going to use this default ease out from the motion plugin. And then what I'll do is probably just give it a little more glide at the end to make it a little bit smoother. Because right now I'm thinking about when you're swiping on a phone, think about how your thumb moves, right? It starts fast, ends slow. So this would be the easing we'd want to use for something like this. Now that feels a little long. I feel like it could be a little snappier. So I'll just adjust the timing by moving that keyframe in. And that feels good, maybe a little bit quicker. Again, sometimes you can kind of exaggerate the duration for these video renders a little just to tell the story, but something like that is probably good. But now we want the slide 2 to start filling up, right? That progress bar, we want it to start filling up as soon as that slides into place. So we'll actually just want to adjust the layer itself. Just move it in time a little bit so that the progress starts right when it snaps into place. Like so. And now we'll just do the same thing. We can actually, because we're animating the null object, we can just duplicate this keyframe here, Command C, Command V, and then move forward around the same distance in time. And then again, change the position. We want to do -812 times 2 in parentheses. And that will slide to the next slide, but we have to just adjust the actual video layer to make sure the video is starting at the right place. So right about there. So now we should have all of our slides. I'm just going to drop this down to third so it renders a little faster. So here's our slide 1. We're going to slide to slide 2. And then slide 3 is our countdown one, which is super awesome. And one thing I'm going to do, just because I don't like how this video starts with this woman kind of off screen, I'm just going to double click into that composition and just mess with the timing of the video itself. So maybe somewhere around there, go back to our main. So that way, maybe a little more. I just want her in view as soon as this slide snaps into place. There we go. Sometimes you have to go into your nested comps and just adjust the actual assets, but that's looking pretty good to me. Now the very last thing we want to do is add some swipe indicators. So when this times out, we want to indicate that the user is actually the one controlling this movement. Now in the actual live app build, the way it works is when this timer reaches the end, the slide will automatically time out to the next, but the user also has that affordance to do that. So we just want to make it really clear that this can be controlled via swipe. That would be an important thing to document if you were, say, handing this off to a developer. So yeah, if we look at the final render again, we have these little swipe indicators. And for those, on my computer, I have these in a folder under AE stuff, just called touch gestures. I think I downloaded this pack a long time ago, and I've just been using them ever since, and they're pretty great. And for this, we just want to use the one that says swipe up, and just kind of resize it to the size of our composition, roughly. This is super long too, so I'm just going to trim it by hitting Command Shift D. And as you see, we have this kind of swipe indication. We just want to line that up to where that swipe would happen. It's important to get this looking somewhat accurate. Otherwise, the flow can look kind of janky and not smooth. So just take the time to make it somewhat realistic looking. I'm also going to just take this layer itself and align it to where this user's thumb would be, assuming that they're right-handed. Make it a little more realistic. And then I'm just going to duplicate it and then just move it over where the next swipe happens, somewhere around there. So that was too late. There we go. Awesome. So now we have our full flow. And to go render this out, really simple to do. Just come over to File, Export, add to Adobe Media Encoder Queue. That's what I use for something like this. And you can just pick where you want to save it on your desktop and just hit render. And here's our final result. And I know some of you guys are probably thinking, I could probably do this in Figma so much faster. And when we were actually doing this project, yes, we prototyped this out in Figma as well. But something I like to do is just always animate kind of like the main flow of the experience in After Effects in high quality, completely controlling the timing, because you want to have these assets to be able to use at your disposal, whether it's making a case study, maybe if you work for an agency, you want this to be on your marketing site, you want this to be, a way to attract new clients. If it's on your portfolio, you just want your work to look as polished as possible. So that's kind of the reason these days I'm doing everything in After Effects as well. But obviously you can't really user test with a video render. You'd have to make it interactive. So if that's something you're interested in, maybe seeing like how I put this together in Figma, I could show you how to do that. It's not going to be as, high fidelity, so to speak, but it got the job done for user testing. So yeah, and I know there's plenty of other tools where you can prototype too, but again, I just like to have that final render somewhere living on my computer so I could, use it at my disposal. So yeah, that's been it. Hopefully that was valuable, and you can use some of these tips and tricks to make something similar.